She heard the piano first, soft, almost hesitant, a few notes rising, fading, then starting again, like someone unsure of the melody, or maybe trying to remember it. Naomi stood just inside the doorway, one hand still on the knob. The house was dim, quiet, and cold. She hadn't told anyone she was coming home early. The hospital thought she'd stay one more night. Corbin hadn't answered her last message. Her phone had died in the cab. She didn't mind. She just wanted her bed, her daughter, her husband. Instead, she found this. The music was coming from Corbin's study, down the hall, behind the double doors he usually kept closed. He never played music when he was alone, not unless he was thinking, or hiding something. She stepped out of her shoes, careful not to let them make a sound on the floor. Her coat slid from her shoulders, but she left it hanging over the entry table. Something in her body had gone still, like it was listening harder than her ears could manage. The scarf caught her eye next. It was wrapped around the stair rail, crimson red, delicate, not hers. She moved slowly, past the grand piano, past the untouched bouquet on the hallway table. That's when she saw the glass. Champagne, half full, lipstick on the rim, still fresh. Her fingers clenched. Her breath tightened. No staff today, no Isla, no warning, just music, the wrong kind. Before we go any further, hit that like button, drop a comment if you've ever come home to something that didn't feel right, and subscribe, because Naomi's story, it's only getting deeper from here. She took a step toward the study. Another note played, sharper this time. Something in her chest twisted. She hadn't felt like this in years, not since the night she almost lost Isla. It was that same ache, that same instinct. Something was wrong, and she hadn't even opened the door yet. Naomi reached the end of the hallway. The music stopped. She waited. No voices, no movement. Her hand hovered over the study door, then slowly pressed down on the handle. It opened without resistance. The lights were low, but not off. A faint yellow glow from the desk lamp cast long lines across the hardwood floor. The piano bench sat empty, but someone was there. A woman stood near the bookshelf, turned slightly away, fingers tracing the edge of a silver picture frame. Her dress, fitted, deep red, looked expensive, like the kind you wear when you want someone to remember you. Naomi stopped just inside the doorway. For a second, her mind fought to keep up with her eyes. The woman turned. Their eyes locked. She didn't flinch. She didn't pretend to be startled. She just looked back, steady and still, like she belonged there. Naomi's voice cracked. "Who are you?" Footsteps echoed behind her. "Corbin." He rushed into the room, shirt half buttoned, expression tight. He froze when he saw her. This... What it looks like," he said, breath uneven. Naomi stood frozen, staring at him. Her mouth was dry. Her chest was heavy. He glanced toward the woman, then back at Naomi. "You're not supposed to be home yet." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why is she here?" The woman stepped back, giving Naomi space, not out of guilt, but something else. Confidence. Control. Naomi's heart thudded in her ears. She looked down. A jacket lay across Corbin's reading chair. Not his. Definitely not hers. She didn't say another word. She turned and walked out. She didn't run. Didn't yell. Just walked. Through the hallway, past the piano, past the champagne glass that now made perfect, painful sense. And this time the silence wasn't strange. It was personal. She made it halfway up the stairs before her legs stopped working. The railing steadied her, but only just. Her knees were trembling, her breath thin and short, and for a moment, she couldn't remember why she'd come home at all. The surgery, the hospital, the recovery, all of it felt like a distant detail in a story that no longer mattered. She had missed Isla. She had missed Corbin. She had missed what their life used to feel like. Now, all she could feel was the heat behind her eyes and the bitter weight of knowing her home no longer felt like hers. She reached the top step and turned toward the bedroom. The door was slightly open. She pushed it gently, and the hinges creaked just enough to make her flinch. Inside, nothing looked touched. Her robe still hung on the hook behind the bathroom door. A book sat on the nightstand where she left it. The sheets were tucked perfectly, but the smell in the room had changed. Corbin's cologne lingered faintly, mixed with something else. Not perfume, but the scent of presence, of people who shouldn't have been here. Naomi sat on the edge of the bed, still in her coat, and stared ahead at nothing. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just sat there. Downstairs, she heard the front door open and close. A car starting, tires rolling over gravel, then nothing. He left. Of course he did. He always did when things got too heavy. He'd step away to clear his head or give space. That was how he handled difficult truths, by making them someone else's burden. Naomi leaned forward and rested her elbows on her knees. Her hands were clenched without her realizing it. Her nails had left marks on her palms. She reached for the dead phone in her coat pocket, stared at the blank screen, then tossed it onto the pillow beside her. She didn't need it right now. What she needed, she didn't even have words for. The quiet settled in like dust, soft and suffocating. Naomi stood up, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain back just enough to look outside. The driveway was empty now. No car, no headlights, just trees and sky, and the last of the evening light beginning to fade. She thought of Isla. Her daughter was safe at Corbin's mother's house for the weekend, a plan Naomi had agreed to before the surgery. She had looked forward to surprising her this evening, to seeing her little arms fly around her waist at the door, to brushing through that wild curly hair while they watched cartoons and ate cereal on the floor. Now she was thankful Isla wasn't here. She turned away from the window and walked slowly through the room, her fingers grazing the edge of the dresser. Her wedding ring sat in its small dish, exactly where she left it that morning in the hospital. She hadn't put it back on. Not yet. It had felt like a small act of practicality. Her fingers were still swollen from the 4th, but now it felt like a question she didn't know how to answer. She left the room and walked down the hall. Her feet led her without thought, past the guest room, past Isla's door, to the end of the corridor where the walls were lined with old photographs Corbin had restored. Family photos, black and white portraits. His father, his grandfather, men with strong chins and hard eyes. She paused in front of one. A photo of Corbin in college, young, wild-haired, smiling with someone beside him. Naomi had always assumed it was an old friend or cousin, but now she looked again, and the woman in the photo looked a lot like the one in the study. Same eyes, same mouth. She moved closer. Her heart kicked again, harder. She remembered asking Corbin once, years ago, "Who's that with you?" He'd shrugged. "Someone I used to know." That's all he'd said. That's all she'd accepted. Until now. Naomi stepped back from the frame like it had burned her. So much of their marriage had been built on what Corbin didn't say. He had a way of skipping over answers without ever sounding dishonest. Not lying, just withholding, charming his way around things. Protecting his past, he called it. Preserving peace. She had never pushed too hard. Now she wished she had. She returned to the hallway, her movements slower now, heavier. Something in her body felt like it had been shifted just a few degrees. Off its center, like nothing in the house quite fit anymore. Not the walls, not the scent, not the silence. Back downstairs, the air had cooled. She walked through the sitting room, catching sight again of the champagne glass near the piano. The lipstick stain, bold and curved, stood out like a signature. She picked it up with a napkin, hands steady. That detail felt important somehow, that she wasn't shaking. Not anymore. On the table beside the piano lay a phone. Not hers, not Corbin's. It was unlocked. No passcode. A message was open on the screen. She didn't want to read it. She read it anyway. "You shouldn't have told him yet." "I had to. He deserves to know. Not like this. Not now." She turned off the screen and put it down. Her eyes scanned the room again. The blanket on the couch was folded too perfectly. A second wine glass, this one empty, sat behind a book on the side table. This wasn't a moment. It was a stay. Whoever she was. She hadn't just visited. She'd settled in. Naomi stood still in the center of the room, surrounded by her own furniture. Her own home, and none of it felt like it belonged to her. And still, the question echoed like a whisper behind her thoughts. Why now? Why today? Why here? What did this woman want? She walked slowly back toward the hallway, the air feeling thicker with every step. There had to be more. Something deeper. And deep down, Naomi already knew. This wasn't just about another woman. This was about Corbin, about who he used to be. and what he'd kept hidden. Naomi stood in the center of the hallway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, but not for warmth. Her whole body was alert, quiet, calculating, like it had been woken up by something she hadn't yet put a name to. Her gaze shifted back to the study door. She had walked out, but she wasn't done. She walked back, slow steps, deliberate, not because she wanted answers, but because she deserved them. The study was empty now. The woman was gone. Corbin was gone. The jacket was still draped over the chair. The piano was closed. The silence, this time, was heavy with meaning. She stepped further in and noticed a framed photo turned face down on the corner table. She picked it up. It was their wedding picture. The two of them, smiling in the late afternoon sun, Isla barely a year old, held in Corbin's arms. Naomi's hand rested on his chest. The light in their eyes felt like a memory that belonged to someone else now. She set the frame upright. Something underneath it caught her eye, a slip of paper folded twice. She opened it. A single line, handwritten in neat script. He still doesn't know everything. No name. No date. No explanation. Naomi blinked once, slowly. She folded the paper and placed it back under the photo, now standing straight again. Not everything. Not yet. But she would. Whatever this was, whoever that woman was, whatever Corbin had buried, Naomi knew this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about identity, about family, and about protecting the only thing that still made sense in her world, Isla. She walked upstairs without looking back. She took off her coat, finally. She opened her suitcase, pulled out her charger, and plugged in her phone. The screen blinked awake. 7 missed messages. 3 from Corbin, 1 from his mother, 1 unknown number, 2 from Isla. She opened Isla's first, a voice note. Naomi hit play. Her daughter's voice was soft, sleepy. "Hi, Mommy. I drew you something. Grandma says you're coming home tomorrow. I miss you. Daddy said he had a surprise for you. I hope it's cookies." Naomi closed her eyes. Her heart cracked at the edges. No more silence. No more blind faith. Whatever Corbin had planned, whoever he had let in, Naomi wasn't going to run from it. She was going to face it. All of it. Starting tonight. The hospital hallway smelled of lemon cleaner and warmed plastic, too clean to feel comfortable. Naomi signed the discharge papers without speaking, her gaze flicking occasionally toward the wall clock. Each second that ticked by tightened something in her chest. "Are you sure you don't want to wait for Corbin?" the nurse asked gently. Naomi gave her a small smile. "I've waited long enough." She wheeled her small suitcase behind her, shoulders tense beneath the oversized cardigan someone had lent her. Her phone battery had died hours ago. No charger, no calls. She didn't care. The lobby lights felt too bright. The taxi was already waiting outside. She slid into the back seat without a word, resting her hands on her lap. The driver confirmed the address, and Naomi nodded. Her voice hadn't fully returned yet, not since the anesthesia wore off. As they drove, her eyes traced the shapes of the trees passing by the window. They'd lost most of their leaves. She used to love this stretch of road. It meant home. Isla. A warm meal waiting. Corbin's laugh, if she was lucky. Today it felt different. She didn't tell anyone she was coming home early. She hadn't even told the doctor until she'd already packed. But something in her heart had whispered, "Go." And she listened. Her hand moved to her stomach. The incision area was sore but manageable. The procedure had been labeled routine, but it hadn't felt that way. Not when she woke up alone. Not when Corbin hadn't shown up until visiting hours were nearly over. Not when Isla's video call had cut off in the middle of her story because Corbin was driving through a patchy area. Naomi blinked hard and shifted her gaze forward. The car rounded the bend. Rosecliff Hill came into view at the top of the incline. The trees grew taller here, older. The estate always looked grand when you approached from this side. But today, the fountain wasn't running. The windows were dark. Naomi sat up straighter. Her keys were in her purse. She checked twice. But as the car pulled to a stop in the driveway, her eyes landed on something that made her skin go cold. The front door was open, just slightly. The taxi driver stepped out to help with her bag, but Naomi waved him off. Her focus was fixed. The house loomed quietly in front of her, the kind of stillness that didn't feel like peace, but pause. As if someone had frozen the moment just before something important. She climbed the steps slowly, her hand tightening around the strap of her purse. The porch creaked under her foot. Normally the fountain masked it with its soft bubbling, but today the sound echoed in the silence. She placed her hand on the door. It moved inward without resistance. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The air was colder than it should have been. Darla usually adjusted the thermostat before sunset, especially in fall, but the house felt unprepared, like it wasn't expecting anyone. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice didn't carry far. It bounced off the high ceilings and disappeared down the hallway. She shut the door behind her. The smell was different. Not unpleasant, just not hers. A faint trace of something floral hung in the air, but it didn't belong to her perfume or Darla's usual cleaning products. She stood for a moment, letting her eyes adjust. No sound of Isla's music drifting from her room upstairs. No quiet hum of the dishwasher from the kitchen. No Corbin calling out from his office or coming down the stairs. Just stillness. She placed her suitcase by the wall and started walking through the main level. The lights were on in the living room, but only one lamp, the others off. A few cushions slightly out of place on the sofa, like someone had sat there and left in a hurry. The folded throw blanket on the edge hadn't been touched. She passed the dining room. The table had one chair pulled out, a coaster still resting at the edge. She made her way back to the front hallway and stood again beneath the tall staircase. Something didn't feel right. It wasn't just the silence. It was the arrangement of things, like someone had tried to make it all appear untouched, but missed just enough for Naomi to notice. And she did notice. Every detail, every shift, every silence. She took the stairs one at a time. Each creak beneath her steps made her more aware of her heartbeat, loud in her chest, echoing in her ears. She wasn't afraid, but something in her gut was tightening with every step, not panic, but certainty. At the top, the hallway stretched ahead, lined with closed doors and soft shadows. A faint draft drifted down from Isla's room, probably a window left slightly open. Naomi noted it and kept walking. She reached her bedroom. The door was closed. She paused, resting her hand on the knob. Then she turned it and stepped inside. Everything was still in place. Her robe, her slippers, the half-finished bottle of lotion she kept beside the bed. The covers were neatly pulled up. The curtains were half drawn. On the nightstand sat the paperback she'd been reading before the surgery. A pressed flower still marking the last page she'd touched. But there was something wrong with the bed. Not the sheets. They were smooth. The pillows. There was only one indentation. Corbin hadn't slept on his side. Not last night. Not the night before. She walked to the vanity and checked the drawers. Her makeup bag was untouched. The small box of letters she kept at the back of the third drawer was still there. She opened it. All her notes were in place. But the photo, the old one of her, Isla, and Corbin at the lake, was missing. She blinked once, twice, then closed the drawer. She left the bedroom and moved down the hall toward Isla's room. The door was open, the light off. She stepped inside quietly, almost out of habit, as if her daughter might be sleeping in the middle of the afternoon. But the room was empty. The small bunny Isla slept with was gone. The books were lined up neatly on the shelf, which meant someone had tidied, someone who wasn't Isla. Naomi turned to leave, her hand brushing against the frame of Isla's doorway. A sound downstairs, faint, too quick to catch. She froze, waited, nothing. Still, she knew she wasn't alone in the house. Not anymore. She moved carefully down the stairs. The sound hadn't come again, but something inside her had shifted. The sense of absence was gone. Now, it felt like presence, just out of sight, just beyond reach. Naomi walked past the dining room again, slowing at the corner. The light above the kitchen island was on, casting a faint glow against the tile. She stepped into the kitchen, scanning the counters. A glass sat in the sink, dry, but beside it lay a spoon dusted with cocoa powder. Isla's favorite evening treat. Darla hadn't been scheduled to return until the next day. Corbin never made cocoa. She opened the fridge. It was mostly empty, just a few containers, one of them open. A slice of cake missing. No note, no message, no care. Naomi closed it gently. She turned and looked around the space again, trying to remember the last time it had felt warm here. She couldn't. She returned to the main hallway and stood at the front entrance. The door she'd found open was now fully closed. She hadn't shut it all the way. She was sure. Her eyes scanned the floor. A faint smear of something near the rug, a scuff mark, as if someone had turned their heel too fast. Her phone had gained just enough charge to flash its screen. 1%. She held it long enough to see no new messages. No missed calls from Corbin. Of course not. She dropped it into her coat pocket and walked into the study. The door was ajar. The lamp on the desk was off, but the window blinds had been pulled back. Faint light stretched across the shelves of books and the edge of Corbin's favorite chair. She stepped toward the grand piano. The bench had been moved slightly, just enough, and next to it, a red scarf. Folded, neat, placed like it had meaning. Naomi stood over it, staring, her throat tightening. She reached down, touched the fabric. Soft, expensive, definitely not hers. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stood there and waited. The red scarf remained where she had found it, untouched on the piano bench. Naomi picked it up carefully and turned it over in her hands. The fabric was rich and light, the kind worn with intention. There was no tag, no perfume scent, no stray thread to explain who. It belonged to just a small embroidered initial at the corner, L. She let out a slow breath and placed it down gently, this time beside the keys. She hadn't heard the front door open. She hadn't heard it close. But someone had been here, maybe still was. Naomi stepped backward and looked around the room. Everything was too still, too orderly. Not abandoned, but cleaned, quickly, intentionally. A book on Corbin's desk was open to the middle. She walked over. A pen lay across the page. The ink had dried into a faint pool near the tip. The chair wasn't pushed in all the way. Her eyes scanned the bookshelf behind the desk. One frame missing from its usual place, a narrow spot left open among the rows. She searched the surfaces nearby but didn't see it. Had someone taken it? She moved back to the hallway and into the sitting room. That's when she saw it. The champagne glass on the side table, tucked behind a cushion, still holding a few slow-rising bubbles. A soft pink lipstick stain curved across the rim. Naomi stared at it for several seconds. Not because she was shocked, she wasn't, but because it confirmed what she hadn't wanted to believe. This wasn't just someone passing through. Someone had been here long enough to make themselves comfortable, long enough to drink, long enough to feel bold. She reached for the remote and turned on the sound system. Nothing happened. She opened the cabinet, checked the settings. Music had been playing earlier. She was sure of it. Now, the interface said. Last track paused. She scrolled back through the queue. The last song was from a playlist Naomi didn't recognize. The title was foreign to her. Something classical. Something Corbin would never listen to on his own. She stood still for a moment, then turned off the system completely. Behind her, the shadows of the hallway stretched across the polished floor. The house felt too large for one person, too arranged to be natural, too quiet to be comfortable. Naomi walked back toward the main hallway, her footsteps quieter now. Slower. She paused by the coat rack near the door. Her jacket still hung where she left it earlier, but there was something else. A scent lingering faintly in the air, caught in the fabric of the space. Something floral. Not strong, not overwhelming, but unfamiliar. She opened the closet. Nothing out of place. No bag, no shoes, no evidence left behind. But that only made her more certain. Whoever had been here had no intention of being caught, but no fear of being found. That kind of confidence only came from someone who believed they had the right to be here. Naomi stepped into the dining room again and let her hand trail across the back of one chair. A single place setting sat at the end of the table. She hadn't seen it before. A plate with a neatly folded napkin still beside it. The silverware had been used, then wiped clean. The detail that made her pause, a cherry stem tied in a knot resting beside the wine glass. She picked it up, stared at it. Who tied this? And who did it in her house? She set it down and turned toward the study. This time, she didn't hesitate. Her fingers gripped the door handle, not like she was knocking, but claiming her space. She pushed it open slowly. The room was dim, but light filtered through the tall windows. The bench at the piano was now straightened. The scarf she had left folded neatly beside it was gone. Her heart jumped, not in fear, in confirmation. Someone had been here after her. Naomi stepped into the room and scanned it again, slowly. Her eyes settled on Corbin's desk. The frame that had been missing from the bookshelf earlier now sat in full view beside the lamp. She moved closer. It was a photo she'd never seen before. Corbin, younger, thinner, in a city she didn't recognize. standing beside a woman with shoulder-length curls and a confident smile, one arm around his back, their faces close. Not friends, not acquaintances. She reached down and picked it up. The woman wore red, not just any red, the exact tone of the scarf. A knot formed in Naomi's throat. She whispered aloud, just once, to herself, a name, but she didn't know what name she had spoken. It wasn't hers. It wasn't Corbin's. It was a name she had never said before, but somehow knew was connected to all of this. She returned the photo to the desk and backed away slowly. No sound behind her, no sign of movement, but the entire house felt like it was holding something in, like it had inhaled and refused to exhale. She stepped out of the study and closed the door behind her. Not locked, not slammed, just shut, enough to mark the line between what she knew and what she was about to learn. Naomi stood at the top of the stairs, her hands lightly resting on the railing, her thoughts caught somewhere between disbelief and certainty. She had seen the photo. She had touched the scarf. She had read the room. Now all that was left was to meet her. There was no sound, no movement, but the house still didn't feel empty. She walked back down, slowly. Every step was deliberate. The hallway stretched ahead like it had grown longer, the air inside heavier than before. As she passed the sitting room, a faint voice drifted into the hallway, not loud, not rushed, just a gentle hum of words strung together by someone speaking to themselves, or maybe on the phone. It came from the guest parlor, a room Naomi rarely used. Corbin almost never did. She turned the corner, her breath steady, her hand relaxed by her side. The door was open. Inside, a woman stood near the far end of the room, adjusting something on a shelf. Her dress, velvet, long-sleeved, deep red, hugged her figure without effort. Her posture was graceful, her movements unhurried. She looked like someone who'd been in that room before, not a stranger. Naomi stepped forward. The woman turned. Their eyes met. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp, just studied Naomi like someone sizing up a name they'd heard before but never seen in person. Naomi's voice was low, even. "Who are you?" The woman blinked slowly, then smiled, soft, deliberate. "I'm sorry," she said, as though that explained anything. Naomi took another step into the room. "You're in my house. I know." She said it with no shame, not arrogance either, just calm. Naomi looked past her. A small handbag sat on the side table, a black coat draped over the arm of the chair, a single heel tucked beneath the edge of the rug like someone had kicked it off casually. "Why are you here?" Naomi asked, her voice thinner now. Before the woman could answer, footsteps echoed from the hallway. Corbin appeared in the doorway. He stopped, like the sight had knocked the air from his lungs. "Naomi," he said quickly, breath catching, shirt half-buttoned, eyes wide. Naomi didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed on the woman in red. Corbin stepped forward, but Naomi didn't move. The woman turned her head slightly toward him, then looked back at Naomi, with a softness that felt intentional, not sympathy, not apology, something else, something unreadable. "This isn't what it looks like," Corbin said. Naomi's jaw clenched. That line, it fell out of his mouth like a reflex, not even hesitation. Just a worn-out phrase used by people who didn't want to answer the real question. She finally turned toward him. "Then explain it." Corbin opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence wrapped around the three of them like a cord drawn tight. The woman broke it. "I'm Lillian." Her voice was clear, smooth, not shy. She said her name like it was something she expected Naomi to recognize. Naomi didn't blink. Corbin ran a hand through his hair, his fingers trembling. "I was going to tell you," he said, eyes darting between them. I didn't expect me to come home?" Naomi asked. "To my own house?" He winced. "I thought you were staying one more night." Naomi folded her arms across her chest. "Apparently, a lot has happened while I was away." Corbin looked at Lillian. She looked back. Whatever passed between them wasn't flirtation. It wasn't guilt either. It was history, thick and unfinished. Naomi turned her gaze back to Lillian. "Why are you here?" Lillian hesitated for the first time. "I didn't come to cause problems," she said. "I just needed to speak with him." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "And you needed champagne for that?" Lillian didn't respond. Corbin took a step closer. "Naomi, please, let me talk to you. Just you and me." She stared at him. The way his eyes darted, the crease in his forehead, the way he kept, shifting his weight from foot to foot, none of it reassured her. It made her feel like she was interrupting something that had already gone too far. She stepped back. "I need space," she said quietly. Corbin reached for her hand. "It's not what you think. You said that already." She turned to leave the room. Leon didn't say a word. Naomi walked out, closing the door behind her, not hard. Just enough to separate the truth from the excuses. Naomi didn't sleep that night. She lay on her side, eyes open, staring at the line where the curtain didn't fully meet the edge of the window. A sliver of moonlight spilled across the wall, unmoving. It reminded her of childhood nights when she'd stay up listening for her father's car pulling into the driveway. The waiting then had been heavy, but not like this. Corbin hadn't come to bed. She heard him moving downstairs for a while, footsteps, drawers, a cabinet door shutting quietly. Then, nothing. Hours passed. No voice, no apology, just space. At some point, her body gave in, not to rest, but to stillness. When she woke, the house was silent again. She got up, pulled on a sweater, and went downstairs. He was in the kitchen, sitting at the end of the counter, a mug between his hands, untouched. He looked up when she entered, eyes red-rimmed but focused. Naomi didn't speak. She poured water into the kettle and turned it on. Corbin watched her move. His hands never left the mug. Finally, he said it. "Her name is Liliane." Naomi didn't turn. "I figured. I didn't invite her here to start anything." She nodded, slowly, but kept her eyes on the kettle. "I knew her a long time ago," he said. "Before the company, before the name change, before all of it." Naomi turned around. "Before you became Corbin Alcott." He looked down. She stared at him for a long time. "Who were you then?" He hesitated. "Elias Rowan." The name hung there, unfamiliar and heavy. Naomi leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You told me once you changed your name for business reasons, said you wanted a clean start." "I did." She tilted her head slightly, but not from a mistake, from a life. Corbin exhaled, slow and sharp. "I was engaged to her." Naomi didn't move. Her breath caught, but her face remained still. "She left," he said. "I left too, eventually. The story between us, it ended badly, not dramatic, just broken. And now, she's back," he said. "She found me again." 2 months ago, Naomi's voice dropped. "And you didn't tell me. I didn't know how." She didn't look away. "So, you let her into our house?" "I didn't invite her to stay. I met her for coffee, twice. She showed up here yesterday. I didn't think—" "You didn't think I'd find out?" Corbin's shoulders dropped. "I didn't think you'd come home early." The kettle whistled softly behind her. Naomi turned it off, but didn't pour the water. She stood there, both hands resting on the counter, back to Corbin. "You were going to keep this from me," she said. "Not just her, the entire part of your life that had a different name." He shook his head. "I wasn't trying to lie." "But you did," she said. "For years." She turned around, eyes locked on his. "And now she's back, not just in town, in our house. That's not just a detail you forget to mention." Corbin rubbed the side of his face. He looked tired, unshaven, but still composed, like he had rehearsed his guilt. "She didn't come alone," he said. Naomi's stomach turned. "What does that mean?" "She has a child." He didn't look at her when he said it. Naomi's heart beat harder, slower. Every breath now had weight. "Let me guess," she said. "A boy." Corbin nodded. Naomi swallowed. "How old?" 9. A silence cracked between them. "And you're telling me this now?" she said. "I didn't know until recently. She didn't tell me until last month." Naomi took a step back, then another. She leaned against the edge of the sink, staring at the fridge like it could anchor her. "What's his name?" she asked. "Emmerich." Her voice lowered to a whisper. "You think he's yours?" "I didn't believe it at first." "You took the test." He hesitated, then nodded. Naomi blinked slowly, her lips parting just slightly. "And—" Corbin didn't say anything. She didn't need him to. Her hands curled tightly into fists. "You built a life with me," she said. "A child, a home, a company, and there was a whole other life waiting to show up at the front door. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to you, Naomi, I had no idea until she showed up. I never got a letter, never heard from her, not once. I didn't even know where she lived after I left." Naomi crossed her arms. "But she found you." She said she'd been looking, that she only found me after seeing an interview I did last year. "And now she's here, with your son." He didn't correct her. He didn't deny it. Naomi looked away, jaw tightening. "Where is he?" "Lillian rented a place nearby. He's with her now." Her voice cut sharper than she meant it to. "Why didn't you go stay with them?" He flinched. Naomi turned back toward the sink, her back rising and falling with each breath. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said quietly. Her voice broke, steady but hollow. "You already did." Naomi stayed at the sink for a long time. The silence wasn't about comfort anymore. It was calculation, the kind that happens when the mind is racing ahead while the heart struggles to keep up. She had never asked Corbin much about his past. He always kept it light, brushed it off with short answers. She assumed there was pain there, some childhood loss, a family issue, maybe a rough start. But never this. Never someone he had loved before so deeply he nearly married her. Never a child. A whole part of him, sealed off and renamed. And now, it had come back with a face, a name, a timeline, and DNA. She turned slowly. "Why didn't you tell me the moment you found out?" Corbin sat still, hands resting on the countertop. "Because I didn't want to lose everything." She blinked at him. "That's not a reason," she said. "It's the only one I had." Naomi studied him. This man who had stood by her through Isla's birth, through 2 losses that nearly broke her, through boardroom betrayals and long hospital nights. The man who held her hand when she was shaking, who ran baths for her when she couldn't move, who read to Isla every night, even when she was too young to understand the words. That man was still here, but now she knew something else. He had once promised forever to another woman. He had once walked away from that woman and never told Naomi she existed. And now she was here again, with his son. Naomi spoke carefully. "Does Isla know?" Corbin looked up, horrified. "No, I would never do that without you." She nodded slowly. "Do you want him in your life?" she asked. "I already met him," Corbin said. "I didn't plan to." "Lillian brought him when we met for lunch one day. He didn't know who I was. He just said I looked like someone from a photo in his mom's drawer." Naomi swallowed hard. "What's he like?" "Quiet, smart, a little reserved, but kind. He asked me questions, thoughtful ones." Naomi felt the ache rise in her throat. "Is he anything like Isla?" "In some ways. The way he tilts his head when he's thinking. That same wide-eyed focus." She felt her eyes sting, but she didn't let the tears fall. "You built a life with me," she said again, softer this time. "And now I have to figure out what part of that life is still mine." Corbin stood slowly. "I don't expect you to know right now. I don't expect anything." She looked at him. "What do you want?" His answer came without hesitation. "You. Still you." Naomi turned away. She walked out of the kitchen, past the front entry, up the stairs, back to the bedroom. She closed the door behind her. The weight of the morning followed her. She sat on the edge of the bed and finally let her body sag. Her arms hung at her sides. Her hands rested in her lap. She stared at the far wall, unfocused. Corbin had a son. Lillian had returned. And she, Naomi, had a choice she never asked to make. She reached for her journal in the drawer beside the bed, the one she hadn't written in for months. She opened a blank page, then stopped. She couldn't write yet. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because what she felt couldn't fit on a page. She closed the book gently and set it aside. Outside, the morning light stretched slowly across the yard, and somewhere in the same town, not far, was a boy named Emmerich, 9 years old, a face she hadn't seen, but already couldn't stop imagining. Naomi waited until late afternoon. She didn't call. She didn't text. She asked no permission. She simply got in the car and drove. The address Corbin had scribbled on the back of a receipt sat on the passenger seat beside her, a rental property on the edge of town, tucked between trees and overlooking the bay. When she pulled up to the house, there was no car in the driveway, just a path of stone slabs leading to the front porch. A row of potted plants stood like quiet sentinels at the steps. Clean, intentional, like someone was trying to make temporary feel permanent. Naomi sat in the driver's seat for a long minute. She could feel the weight in her chest again. But it wasn't fear. It was knowing. She stepped out of the car and walked to the door, raised her hand, knocked twice. Lilian opened it without hesitation. There was no expression of surprise, no hesitation, just that same quiet control Naomi remembered from the first moment. "Naomi," she said calmly, "I thought you might come." Naomi didn't reply. Lilian stepped aside. "Would you like to come in?" She did. The living room was small, bright, clean. A throw blanket folded over the couch, a pair of child's shoes by the back door, a small table with 2 mugs, one rinsed, one still half full. A drawing lay on the coffee table in colored pencil, a boy and a tall man with dark hair. No names written, just a small heart in the corner. Naomi stared at it. Lilian followed her eyes. "He draws that one often. Says the man looks like someone he dreams about." Naomi turned toward her. "You told him?" "No," she said, "not until recently." "Why now?" Lilian sat down, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap. "Because he asked questions I couldn't keep answering with half-truths, and because eventually someone else would have told him, or he'd figure it out." Naomi remained standing. Lilian motioned to the other chair. "You don't have to sit. I won't be long." Lilian tilted her head slightly. "You came for answers." Naomi kept her eyes steady. "I came to look in your face while I asked the questions." Lilian nodded. "Then ask." Naomi didn't blink. "Was it an accident?" she asked. Lilian looked at her. "The pregnancy?" Naomi nodded once. "No," Lilian said. "It wasn't." Naomi's throat tightened, but she held her posture. "I didn't trap him," Lilian added quickly, her tone even. "It wasn't calculated. It was just life. He left before I could tell him." "That's the truth." Naomi didn't respond. Lilian leaned forward slightly, resting her forearms on her knees. "You want to hate me," she said. "And I don't blame you, but I'm not here to compete. I'm here because Emmerich deserves to know who he comes from." Naomi's voice came quietly. "He comes from you. And from Corbin," Lilian said without hesitation. "He doesn't believe it." Lilian smiled faintly, not with arrogance, but something close to pity. "He does now." Naomi stared at her. Lilian continued. "He fought it at first, demanded proof. I gave it to him. But you know what convinced him more than the test?" Naomi didn't answer. Lilian's gaze didn't waver. Emmerich's eyes, the way he speaks when he's nervous, the way he holds a pencil when he draws. Naomi shifted her stance. "Those aren't paternity tests." "No," Lilian said. "They're reminders. Of a history he buried. Of a version of himself he gave up when he chose to start over." Naomi crossed her arms. "You're speaking like he's still that man." Lilian's expression softened. "A part of him always will be. You don't erase that much of yourself without leaving pieces behind." Naomi's voice lowered. "So, what are you saying? That I've been living with a stranger?" "I'm saying," Lilian replied gently, "that the man you know is only complete because he walked through a life before you." Naomi let the words hang. She didn't want to hear them, but part of her had already thought them. Lilian stood and walked to the side table. She picked up a small envelope and handed it to Naomi. "This is from him, from Elias. Years ago. He wrote it before he left. I kept it." Naomi didn't take it. Lilian placed it on the table beside her. "I'm not here to tear you apart," she said quietly. "But your daughter deserves the truth. So does my son." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "Don't speak about Isla." Lilian met her gaze. "Then speak to her. Before the world does." Naomi turned without another word and walked out the door. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Naomi kept her hands steady on the wheel, but her mind wasn't still. Lilian's voice echoed like a song she didn't want to remember. Calm, sure, and quiet, a voice not asking to be liked, only heard. She hated how much of it made sense. At home, the house stood silent. Corbin wasn't downstairs. A single light flickered in the hallway upstairs, the one just outside their bedroom. She walked up slowly, each step heavier than the last. The door was cracked. She pushed it open gently. Corbin sat at the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. He looked up when he heard her. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged. None needed. The silence between them was already thick with everything that hadn't been said. Naomi stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She set her purse down, took off her jacket, moved carefully, deliberately, like the air had changed, and she was still adjusting to its weight. "You saw her?" Corbin said quietly. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Did she tell you about the letter?" "She showed it to me," Naomi replied. "I didn't read it." Corbin looked down again. "That letter was from someone I used to be." "Elias," she said. He nodded. Naomi moved to her side of the bed and sat, not too close, not too far. She said, "Emmerich asked about you," she said, voice low. "He did. She said he draws you from memory." Corbin looked over at her. "He doesn't know it's me. Not fully. Just a feeling, I think." Naomi's throat tightened. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" She asked again, this time without anger, just tired sadness. "I thought it would go away," he admitted. "I thought if I didn't open that door it would stay closed. And I could keep you, keep Isla, keep everything I built with you." Naomi stared ahead. "And what if this changes everything?" Corbin's voice cracked. "It already has." They sat in silence. Naomi finally turned toward him. "Do you love her?" Corbin's head jerked up. "No. I haven't in a long time. Did you ever stop?" "I did," he said. "The day she left without a word. I waited, I searched, and eventually I decided I couldn't keep waiting." Naomi pressed further. "And if she hadn't vanished?" "I don't know," he whispered. The truth hit her like a bruise she hadn't realized was already there. She lay back on the bed without another word, turned to face the wall. He didn't follow. He stayed seated on the edge, the weight of the moment pinning him there. The moonlight traced faint shapes across the ceiling. Naomi blinked at them, her eyes burning but dry. She couldn't sleep, not with questions curled up in her chest like a second heartbeat. She listened to the silence, to the breathing of a man who had shared everything with her. Except this. Doubt had crept in. Not loud, not sudden, but quiet, like water under a door. The next morning, Naomi stood alone in the library. It was early, the house still quiet, sun just beginning to rise behind the trees. The smell of coffee wafted from downstairs, but she hadn't touched it. Her hands felt restless, like they needed to be busy before her thoughts drowned her. She ran her fingers across the shelves, wood polished smooth over the years. She wasn't looking for anything specific. Or maybe she was. She wasn't sure yet. Something had shifted the night before. Corbin's answers hadn't satisfied the weight inside her. They'd only fed it. She needed something more than words. In the far corner of the room sat the old desk, wide, oak-framed, with brass handles that never polished quite right. It had been Corbin's favorite. He rarely used it now, but he'd once called it the keeper of his former life. That memory clung to her now. Naomi pulled out the top drawer, pens, receipts, charger cables. The second, stamps, a stapler, loose keys. She opened the bottom one. Nothing. Then she noticed the lock. A thin panel of wood at the back, almost hidden in the shadows beneath the drawer. She crouched, pushing against it. It clicked. Behind it, wedged in a narrow gap, was a thin metal box. Dusty, scratched but not forgotten. Her fingers hesitated for just a moment. Then she opened it. Inside, she found old photographs, worn, with curled edges. Most were black and white, some faded color. In one, a younger Corbin, or Elias, sat on a dock, arms around a woman she now recognized. Liliane. They looked young and happy, careless in a way that only people without secrets could look. Naomi's eyes burned. She sifted through the rest. A letter on thick paper, the handwriting familiar. Another envelope, yellowing at the edges, sealed and marked in delicate cursive. "For my son." Naomi froze. She stared at the envelope, heart suddenly pounding. It didn't have a name, no date, just those words. She opened it. Inside was a single page, a legal will. Elias Rowan, executor, Matthew Pierce, family attorney, beneficiary to my son, whose name I may not know, but whose existence I cannot deny. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. She read the next line. It detailed assets, modest compared to Corbin's empire now, but still significant. Land in Oregon, shares in a startup, a collection of personal journals. And at the bottom, scrawled by hand, You deserved more than silence. I hope one day you'll forgive me for that." She sat back on the carpet, chest rising and falling, the letter in one hand, the photograph of Elias and Lillian in the other. He had planned for a son. Not recently, not since the paternity test, but years ago, before he met her, before Isla, before any of the life they built together. Naomi sat motionless for a long time. The silence in the library was so complete, she could hear the ticking of the old grandfather clock across the room, one tick for every second that passed and pressed down on her chest like weight. She closed the box, placed the photo and will on her lap, and leaned against the bookshelf. Her knees drew in close. She hadn't felt this small in years. The air in the room was still, but inside her, everything moved. Why had he hidden this? Why keep a letter this personal tucked away in a place he never went anymore? Was it guilt? Grief? A refusal to let go? Naomi pressed her forehead to her hands. She had told herself she could forgive many things, distance, silence, mistakes. But this was a map of a life she'd never been invited into, a life she was now expected to coexist with. Her thoughts tumbled backward without her permission, to the early days of their courtship, dinners at strange hours, sudden trips, stories he'd leave half-finished, questions she had chalked up to mystery, the kind that made men more intriguing than dangerous. He told her he had no close family, that his upbringing was complicated, that he'd changed his name because of business ties, something vague, easy to swallow. She hadn't pushed. She'd wanted to believe the version of himself he offered was enough. Now she realized he hadn't changed his name. He had buried it. Naomi stood slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the trees shifted gently in the breeze. She watched the swing Isla used when she was little, swaying slightly, though no one touched it. There had been love in this house, real love, but she wondered now, had she fallen in love with a name, a mask, a half-truth, or had the man underneath been real too? She returned to the desk, took out the envelope again. To my son, a son he hadn't even known existed at the time, but something in him had known, or hoped, or feared. She reached into the box again and found a thin notebook, pages filled with Elias's handwriting, rough, fast, full of emotion. Not business plans, not legal notes, letters, dozens of them. None sent. Some started with Dear Lillian. Others simply began with, I wish. She read one at random. I tried to call you today. The number said disconnected. I drove past your old apartment. Nothing. It's like you vanished. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. Rage? Sadness? I just feel gone. She shut the notebook. Part of her wanted to throw it in the fireplace and pretend none of this had happened. But another part, the one that had stayed up nights nursing Isla, the part that had forgiven Corbin after his worst business scandal, the part that had once stood by him through court and press, that part needed to understand. Not just what he had done, but who he had been. Corbin found her in the kitchen. She didn't look up when he walked in. She was seated at the island counter, her arms crossed loosely, the metal box resting beside. A folded napkin like it belonged there, like it had always been a part of their lives. I was looking for coffee, she said quietly. He said nothing. He saw the box. He knew. Naomi finally turned her head and met his gaze. You kept it all? He nodded. Why? Corbin walked in slowly, sat across from her. I didn't know how to let it go. I didn't know how to explain it. She watched him, her voice steady. Explain it to me now. He hesitated for a long moment. That box, he said, was from a time in my life when I didn't know who I was yet. I was 25, angry, trying to be someone worth keeping. Lillian and I, we were messy. We fought more than we laughed, but I thought she was it. And the will? Naomi asked. Corbin exhaled. She told me once she might be pregnant. Then she disappeared, wouldn't return my calls. I wrote that will because I thought, if there was a child, and if something ever happened to me, he'd at least get something. Naomi blinked hard. You told me you had no one. I believed that. After she left, I felt like I didn't deserve to have people anymore. Her voice broke just slightly. You didn't think I deserved to know? I was scared, he admitted, that it would change the way you saw me, that you'd think you were just the second act. She closed her eyes, slow and tight. That had been her fear exactly. And am I? She asked. Am I just the woman you settled for after you lost the one who mattered? Corbin stood, walked around the counter, then stopped short of reaching her. You're the woman who made me stop running. Naomi's jaw clenched, but her eyes shone. You buried a whole life, Corbin. A name, a child, a love. How am I supposed to believe anything else you say after this? I don't want you to believe my words, he said, voice low. I want you to believe the years, everything we've built. Isla, the quiet nights, the fights, the way I show up, even when I get it wrong. She stood slowly, her breath unsteady. You're asking for a lot. I know. She stepped back. I need time. He nodded, his shoulders falling slightly. I'll give you all the time you need. Naomi picked up the box, not because she wanted to keep it, but because it now belonged to her truth too. A truth she hadn't asked for, but had inherited just the same. As she walked past him, Corbin reached out, not to stop her, but to steady her elbow gently. She didn't pull away. She didn't look back either. But for the first time since the hospital, she felt like she was walking with, her eyes open, even if she didn't yet know where the road would lead. Could you forgive a secret like this? Let me know in the comments. The clouds were heavy that morning, their weight pressing against the tall windows. Of Rosecliff, like they too, carried something they couldn't hold back anymore. Naomi stood in the foyer, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the driveway. Her suitcase from the hospital still sat unopened by the stairs. She had barely slept. Upstairs, Corbin's side of the bed had gone untouched. He hadn't tried to sleep beside her, hadn't even asked. Maybe he knew she wouldn't have said yes. The kitchen clock ticked louder than usual. Each passing second stretched like a string pulled too tight. Then came the sound of tires on gravel. Naomi straightened. A car door slammed. Small footsteps. Then laughter. Not Emmerich's. Isla. Naomi opened the door just as her mother stepped onto the porch, umbrella. Over her head, Isla clutching her hand and grinning with gap-toothed joy. Mommy. Isla broke free and ran up the steps before Naomi could prepare for the embrace. She dropped to her knees just in time to catch her. Naomi closed her eyes, holding her daughter tight, inhaling the soft warm scent of bubblegum shampoo and rain-damp jacket. For one full minute, she forgot the weight in her chest. I missed you so much, Isla mumbled into her shoulder. I missed you more, Naomi whispered back. Her mother gave a quiet smile and placed Isla's overnight bag by the door. She was perfect as always, but she kept asking when she could come home. Naomi stood, nodding. Thank you. I'll let you two settle in, her mother said gently. She leaned in, kissed her cheek. Call if you need anything. Anything. Naomi nodded again, a silent thank you tucked behind tight lips. As Isla bounded into the house, Naomi turned just in time to see another car pull up at the end of the drive. It was Corbin. And he wasn't alone. A boy stepped out of the passenger seat. Dark curls, wide eyes, hands shoved into his pockets. Naomi didn't move. Her breath caught. Her hand gripped the edge of the door frame. Corbin looked at her, then at Isla, who peeked around the corner from inside. He walked forward slowly, the boy behind him, hesitant. I didn't want to do this like this, Corbin said. His voice was careful, respectful. Naomi's eyes flicked down to the boy. She didn't need confirmation, but he gave it anyway. This is Emmerich, he said. She looked at the child, then back to Corbin. Corbin cleared his throat, his hand tightening at his side. The test came back. Naomi felt her knees threaten to give. He nodded, quietly. He's mine. The porch swayed, or maybe it was just the world spinning on a different axis than before. She felt it, that exact moment where life rewrites itself, casually, like it had all been waiting for this chapter to begin. She swallowed hard. How long have you known for sure? 3 days, Corbin replied. But I had a feeling long before that. Naomi pressed her lips together. 3 days. He had walked around this house, slept under its roof, held her hand, knowing. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her body turned to stone from the inside out. I'm sorry, he said. There's no version of this where I'm not. But I needed you to know the truth. Naomi looked at Emmerich again. His face was unsure, not frightened, just unsure. He was trying to gauge if this house, this woman at the door, was a danger or a welcome. She couldn't find words. Instead, she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Not a slam, not rejection, but a pause. A single, silent breath between the past and whatever came next. The door shut behind her with a softness that didn't match the storm inside her chest. Naomi leaned back against the wall, her arms still folded, fists clenched in opposite sleeves. For a long minute, she didn't move. Upstairs, Isla's footsteps padded down the hall, her voice calling out as she searched for her favorite plush toy. Naomi didn't answer. She moved toward the living room instead, slowly, as if every step was through thick fog. The couch was cold. She sat, hands in her lap, staring at the floor. Not crying, not thinking, just sitting. Time passed without shape. It was Isla who finally pulled her back. "Mommy." Naomi looked up. Isla was holding a drawing in her hand. Crayon swirls and bright stick. Figures, one taller than the rest with brown curls and a shy smile. "I made a new friend." Naomi swallowed. Isla added quickly, "He said his name is Emmerich. He was quiet. But I think he likes pancakes." Naomi nodded slowly. "Did you talk to him?" "A little. He said he likes books, like me." She smiled, faint but real. "Of course, he does. Is he gonna stay here?" Naomi looked down. Isla waited, patient, curious, untouched by the weight of adult complications. "I don't know yet, baby," Naomi finally whispered. Isla gave a small nod, like that answer was good enough for now. Naomi pulled her daughter close. They sat on the couch, Isla's head on her shoulder, Naomi's hand stroking her hair. It was the only moment of stillness she'd felt in days. Later, after Isla had gone to her room and drifted to sleep with her nightlight, humming low, Naomi stood by the window, watching the sky grow dark. Corbin hadn't left. She saw him outside, pacing near the tree line, hands in his coat pockets. Emmerich had gone back to the car, curled up in the back seat, drawing in a notebook. She watched them both. Eventually, she opened the door again. Corbin looked up, caught off guard. Naomi didn't speak, just stepped aside. "You can come in," she said. "Both of you." Corbin looked at her like she'd just handed him something precious. "I'm not ready to talk," she added. "Not about everything." He nodded. "Okay." She looked toward the car. "He must be hungry." "He likes grilled cheese," Corbin said softly. "And strawberry jam." Naomi raised a brow. "Together?" He gave a faint smile. "I didn't say he had good taste, just taste." She turned, left the door open behind her. By the time she reached the kitchen, Corbin and Emmerich had stepped inside, the boy quietly scanning the foyer as if memorizing every line of it. Naomi moved through the motions of making grilled cheese and cutting strawberries. She didn't speak, and neither did Corbin. Emmerich sat at the counter, feet swinging off the stool, his eyes tracing the lines of the tile on the floor. When she slid the plate in front of him, he whispered, "Thank you." She didn't reply, but her hand paused for just a second on the counter before she turned away. The house was different now, not colder, just uncertain. A family had returned, reshaped. One truth is heavier. One more boy. One marriage. Cracked, but not entirely shattered. And Naomi? She was still standing, still choosing. And that, for now, would have to be enough. The sun filtered in through the windows, soft and slow. Morning at Rosecliff had always felt like this, gentle, calm, predictable. But Naomi was not the same woman who once found peace in routine. She stood in the kitchen, slicing apples with a steady hand, listening to the quiet thrum of a cartoon playing from the living room. Isla's laughter rang out, followed by Emmerich's softer chuckle, like he hadn't laughed in a long time and was still learning how. It was their second day together. Naomi hadn't asked questions. Not yet. She had offered breakfast, books, and a few warm smiles. She hadn't pressed Emmerich for answers or memories. Children shouldn't have to explain themselves. He sat now cross-legged on the floor with Isla, surrounded by toy animals and pillows. Their game made no sense, but they didn't seem to care. Emmerich's eyes lit up every time Isla handed him a new character. She was guiding him without even realizing it, pulling him into her little world, one silly voice at a time. Naomi watched them from the kitchen doorway. She carried the plate of apples into the living room and crouched beside them. Snack time. Both kids looked up. "Thank you," Emmerich said, quiet but sure. Naomi nodded and tousled Isla's curls. As the kids munched, Naomi leaned back against the couch and closed her eyes for a second. Not to rest, just to center herself. She remembered what it felt like to be young and overlooked. She remembered wondering if adults could see the difference between being fine and pretending to be. Emmerich had that same silence. Not fearful, just watchful. She wouldn't treat him like a stranger, but she wouldn't smother him either. She'd let him come to her on his own time. That was her strength, not in control, but in restraint. Later that afternoon, she found Emmerich alone in the library, curled up in the oversized armchair, holding a book on birds. His eyes scanned the pages slowly, as though he was trying to memorize each feather, each wing. Naomi walked in quietly and sat in the armchair across from him. She said nothing. He looked up, hesitant. "That's one of Isla's favorites," she said gently. "She used to name the birds like pets. There's a red cardinal she called Button." Emmerich's lips curled slightly. "Button." Naomi smiled. He looked down at the page again, finger tracing the edge of the drawing. "She told me your garden has hummingbirds," he said after a moment. Naomi nodded. "A few. They like the lavender out back." A pause. "Do they let you get close?" "If you're patient." Another small nod from him. Naomi leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "You don't have to talk much, Emmerich. Not here. Not unless you want to." His eyes flicked toward her, quick, unsure, then back to the page. But she noticed his shoulders relax, just a little. That evening, the three of them sat around the kitchen table. Isla told long-winded stories about school, her voice rising with excitement. Emmerich listened, wide-eyed, asking questions now and then. Naomi cooked while they talked. She turned at one point to find Corbin standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets. He hadn't said much all day. He'd stayed out of the way, quiet, waiting. Naomi motioned with her chin toward the table. "They're getting along." He nodded. "They're good for each other," she added, not looking at him. He stepped closer. "I can sleep in the guest house if it helps. I just want to be nearby for both of them." Naomi turned to him fully now. Her voice didn't rise. Her face was calm. "I'm not angry the way you think I am." Corbin's brows knit. "I'm not here to punish you," she continued. "But you don't get to step into this house and act like it hasn't changed, like we're just picking up from where we left off. I know. No, I don't think you do. Because if you did, you'd stop looking at me like you're waiting for forgiveness." He lowered his gaze. Naomi's voice softened, but stayed firm. "This isn't about forgiveness. It's about space, about proving with time what words can't cover." She picked up a towel and wiped her hands. "You can stay in the guest house." Corbin nodded. "Thank you." But Naomi wasn't thanking him for anything. She was stating terms, quietly, clearly, because this wasn't just her home anymore. It was a place being rebuilt, one small choice at a time. Naomi stood at the edge of the garden path, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. The late afternoon light slanted through the trees, casting warmth over the quiet backyard. Isla and Emmerich sat on a blanket near the flower beds, their voices low. Heads tilted close as they played a card game she didn't recognize. They didn't need her in that moment, and that, somehow, made her chest ache and swell all at once. She approached quietly, offering the lemonade with a small smile. "Thanks," Isla beamed, grabbing her glass. Emmerich nodded politely and took his. Naomi didn't sit. "I'll be on the porch," she said softly. "Call me if you need anything." As she turned away, she heard Emmerich's voice. "Naomi?" She paused. He was looking up at her, not as a stranger, not as an intruder, but something in between. "Thank you for letting me be here." Naomi nodded once, her voice caught in her throat. "You belong where people care," she said quietly. "That's all that matters." She returned to the porch and sat alone, watching them. Isla threw her head back in laughter at something he said. Emmerich smiled, really smiled, and something deep inside Naomi shifted. This wasn't about fixing everything. It was about choosing to not let pain dictate what came next. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Naomi sat at the kitchen table, flipping through an old photo album. Not the one Corbin kept in the office, but the one she had made when Isla was born. Moments frozen in smiles. First steps, paint-covered hands, summer days at the lake. Corbin stepped in quietly, a folder in his hand. I wanted to give you this," he said, placing it on the table. She looked at him, but didn't reach for it. "It's Emmerich's file. School reports, medical records, drawings. I thought, if you're going to be around him, you should know the parts I do." Naomi stared at the folder. "And the parts you don't?" she asked without looking up. Corbin exhaled. "That's where I failed. She finally met his eyes. You didn't just fail me, Corbin. You failed your son. And yourself. He nodded, taking the blow. She picked up the folder and held it in her lap. I'll read it. Not for you. For him. I understand. He turned to go, but paused. I know I don't have the right to ask, but does any of this mean you're open to trying again? Naomi looked down at her hands. I'm open to healing, and healing doesn't mean running back to what broke me. He nodded, lips pressed together. She didn't say more. The next morning, Naomi packed a lunch for all three of them, Isla, Emmerich, and herself. They sat beneath the old maple tree out back, spreading out a blanket. Emmerich offered to carry the thermos. Isla picked the spot. Naomi just followed. They talked about books, favorite animals, and silly school stories. At one point, Isla asked if Emmerich could come to her school someday. Naomi didn't interrupt. Emmerich answered first, looking down at his sandwich. I think, maybe, I'd like that. Isla grinned. Naomi smiled but stayed quiet. She was learning that strength didn't always need a voice. Sometimes it was presence. Steady, soft, constant. After lunch, she brought out paper and crayons. The kids sat together drawing while Naomi pulled weeds from the garden beds. They were quiet for a while, focused, until Emmerich stood and approached her. He held out a drawing. Naomi took it gently. It showed a house, their house, with 4 figures in front, 2 kids, a woman, and a man, all smiling. Naomi looked at him. I wasn't sure what to draw, he said. So I made this. Her eyes softened. It's beautiful. He nodded and returned to the blanket. Naomi held the paper against her chest for a moment before folding it carefully and slipping it into her apron pocket. It didn't mean everything was fixed, but it meant something real had started. And for the first time in weeks, she felt peace begin to bloom. Corbin didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply showed up. Every morning he was there, sometimes before the sun, sometimes just after. Never knocking, never waiting. Just there, with groceries in hand or breakfast already made. He moved quietly, respectfully, as if the house no longer belonged to him, but to the silence Naomi kept between them. Naomi said little at first. She watched him from across the kitchen, arms folded, lips pressed. Thin, the weight of everything unspoken building behind her ribs. But she didn't send him away. Not anymore. His presence was not grand. It was simple, consistent. He started Isla's favorite morning playlist without being asked. He remembered that Emmerich hated crust on his sandwiches. He learned how Naomi took her tea again. No sugar, just a dash of oat milk. And he never asked for a seat at the table. He earned it, one morning at a time. Naomi began journaling again. The first pages were short, almost reluctant. He folded laundry today. Even paired the socks. Emmerich didn't speak at dinner, but he smiled when Isla offered her last cookie. I didn't cry today, not once. Each entry bled into the next, gathering pieces of a woman learning to breathe again. Writing gave her the clarity her heart couldn't reach on its own. She wrote about her dreams too, not the restless kind she'd had during the worst of the pain, but dreams that dared to imagine peace. She dreamt of starting over, of launching her candle line again, of taking Isla and Emmerich on a trip to the coast. The more she wrote, the more she saw herself returning. Not the woman she used to be, someone steadier, wiser, a woman who knew how much it cost to love fully and still chose to try. The children were healing in their own way. Isla adored Emmerich. She'd taken to him like he'd always been part of her world. They played for hours in the backyard, turning tree stumps into pirate ships and flower beds into treasure troves. She taught him how to braid friendship bracelets. He taught her how to skip stones better than anyone else on the block. Naomi watched them, grateful and quiet. One afternoon, she overheard Isla whisper to Emmerich, I think you're my favorite person. He didn't answer out loud, but Naomi saw the way he looked at Isla after that, like he'd been waiting for someone to call him something good. That evening, Naomi stood in the kitchen washing dishes. The window was open, the breeze soft against her face. Behind her, Corbin stood silently, towel in hand, drying the plates. He didn't speak until she did. Emmerich told me today that he wants to stay here for good. Corbin paused. I want that too. But only if you're okay with it. She looked at him. It's not about me being okay, Corbin. It's about him feeling safe. He nodded. I'm doing my best. I know, she replied. And I see it. But that didn't mean her heart wasn't still cautious. Just because someone shows up every day doesn't erase the fact that they disappeared once. Still, consistency has its own language, and Corbin was learning to speak it fluently. He never pushed for affection, never reached for her hand. But he started bringing her small things she hadn't realized she missed: her favorite chocolate, the book she mentioned, wanting 6 months ago, a photo of Isla from when she was 3 that he'd kept in his wallet all these years. Little things, important things. She didn't thank him every time, but she stopped pulling away. Weeks passed, and the rhythm became steady. Not perfect, not healed, but steady. Corbin arrived each morning as though it was his duty, not his right. He carried groceries, fixed squeaky hinges, replaced burnt-out bulbs. He folded laundry, carried heavy boxes, and learned to cook pancakes exactly the way Isla liked them, slightly crispy on the edges, soft in the middle. It wasn't about winning Naomi back. It was about proving that he could stay. Naomi noticed the change, though she rarely admitted it out loud. She noticed how Emmerich's posture relaxed when Corbin was near, how Isla no longer asked, why her father wasn't home at night, because in her eyes he was home every morning. One evening, Naomi sat at the dining table with her journal. The house was finally quiet. She opened to a fresh page and wrote, "Love isn't rebuilt in grand gestures. It's rebuilt in small, unshakable steps. He's showing me steps now, but I don't know yet if they'll be enough." She set her pen down and closed the book. Outside, she saw Corbin sitting alone on the porch swing, staring out at the yard. He didn't look restless. He looked grounded, like a man who finally understood that staying put was the hardest work of all. The children's bond only grew deeper. Isla introduced Emmerich to all of her favorite books. He, in turn, taught her how to sketch small, detailed maps of the backyard, pretending they were explorers. Naomi often found them huddled together with crayons and notebooks, whispering about secret hideouts and coded messages. Once, she heard Isla whisper to Emmerich, "You're like my brother." Naomi froze at the doorway, listening. Emmerich's reply was quiet but clear. "I think so too." Her heart cracked open and healed in the same breath. Corbin kept his distance in matters of the heart. But every now and then, moments slipped through. One Saturday morning, Naomi came downstairs to find the smell of bread baking. Corbin was in the kitchen, apron tied, flour dusting his shirt. "What are you doing?" she asked. He looked up, sheepish. "You told me once your grandmother made bread every Sunday. I thought maybe I'd try." Naomi stared at him for a moment, then pulled out a chair and sat. She didn't help. She didn't need to. Just watching him stumble through the recipe with genuine care was enough. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Naomi stepped onto the porch. Corbin was there again, the night air cool around him. "You've changed," she said simply. He turned, startled. "I've had to." Naomi crossed her arms, leaning against the railing. "Change doesn't erase the past." "I know," he admitted, "but maybe it can shape the future." She studied him for a long time, then nodded once. Maybe. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a door left ajar. By the end of the month, Naomi's journal had filled half its pages. She no longer wrote only about pain. She wrote about possibility. She wrote about strength. She wrote about mornings that didn't feel heavy anymore. One entry read, "The children laugh together now like they were never apart. Corbin doesn't push, but he doesn't disappear either. I still don't know if trust can be fully rebuilt, but for the first time I'm not afraid of trying." She closed the journal, placed it on her nightstand, and let herself rest without the weight of yesterday pressing down. For the first time in weeks, she dreamed of light instead of loss. Know someone who'd love this story, share it with them, and spread the love. The festival came every summer, but this year Naomi felt it differently. She held Isla's hand as they walked through the town square, the glow of paper lanterns flickering in every direction. The air buzzed with laughter, music from a local band, and the sweet scent of roasted almonds and kettle corn. Children darted past carrying small lanterns, their faces painted with swirls of stars and moons. Beside her, Emmerich clutched his own lantern, wide-eyed, as though he had stepped into another world. He didn't say much, but Naomi could see it in his face, the wonder, the awe, the need to believe that joy was still possible. Corbin walked slightly behind them, carrying an extra lantern. He hadn't pushed to walk beside her, hadn't tried to take her hand. He respected the space she'd asked for, but she could feel him there. Always there. Naomi glanced down at Isla, who tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy, can we write our wishes now?" Soon, Naomi said softly. We'll find a spot. They reached the open field near the water where families were gathering. Hundreds of lanterns swayed on long strings, waiting for nightfall to rise into the sky. Naomi found a blanket near the edge of the crowd and spread it out for the children. Isla immediately pulled out a marker from her little purse. I already know what I'm writing. What's that? Naomi asked, smiling. Isla bent over her lantern and wrote in careful, shaky letters that our family stays together. Naomi's throat tightened. She stroked Isla's hair gently, pressing a kiss to her temple. Emmerich sat quietly with his lantern, staring at the blank space. Naomi watched him. He bit his lip, then finally wrote something small, almost hidden. To feel like I belong. She swallowed hard. Corbin sat cross-legged a few feet away, holding his lantern but not writing yet. He looked at Naomi, his eyes soft, almost cautious. What about you? Naomi picked up her lantern. She stared at the blank paper stretched across the frame. For a long time, she couldn't move her pen. Finally, she wrote, May my heart trust again. The words stared back at her, raw and simple, but true. When dusk settled, the crowd hushed. The mayor gave a short speech about hope and community. Then the music started, soft strings, warm vocals. Families rose together, lanterns lit, paper glowing gold against the fading sky. Naomi stood with Isla and Emmerich, holding their small hands as the children's lanterns lifted into the night. One by one, the sky filled with light. She looked at Corbin then. He had lit his lantern too, though he hadn't written anything on it. He just let it rise, quiet, like a prayer too private for words. Their eyes met across the field. For the first time in weeks, Naomi didn't look away. The lanterns floated higher, scattering like stars, and something in her chest loosened. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But release. She turned toward him, and he stepped closer. For once, she didn't move back. Naomi stood still as the sky filled with drifting light. Lanterns rose higher, each one carrying words, hopes, confessions. She could feel the warmth of Isla pressed against her leg, the quiet presence of Emmerich at her side. Corbin stepped nearer, lantern flame glowing between them. His face was softened by the golden light, his expression unguarded. For weeks, she had seen him as a stranger who had broken her trust. Tonight, though, she saw the man who had once knelt with her on this same field years ago, when they first started coming to the festival. Back then, she had wished for a child. Isla had been born the next spring. She let that memory steady her. Isla tugged at her hand. Mommy, did you make a wish? Naomi nodded. I did. What was it? Isla's voice was bright, curious. Naomi bent to her level, brushed her curls back, and whispered so softly that only her daughter could hear, that my heart learns to trust again. Isla smiled wide, as if she understood more than her years should allow. Emmerich's lantern drifted up, slow and careful. Naomi placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. He looked up at her, his eyes reflecting the light, and whispered, It feels like magic. It is, she replied, the kind that comes when you believe in new beginnings. As the last lanterns lifted, Corbin stepped closer. Naomi could feel the warmth radiating off him, the quiet question in his presence. He didn't reach for her. He hadn't in weeks, but tonight felt different. She turned to him fully. Her chest tightened. Corbin's voice was low, meant only for her. No more secrets, Naomi. If you'll have me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving it. The words weren't polished. They weren't grand. They were simple, honest. Naomi studied him, the years of history etched into the lines of his face, the father of her daughter, the man who had hidden truths, the man who had shown up every day since. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she closed the distance and pressed her lips to his. It wasn't the fiery kiss of passion. It wasn't desperate. It was steady, a seal, not of perfection, but of willingness to try. When she pulled back, her eyes glistened. This doesn't erase everything. I know, he whispered. But it's a start. He nodded. Relief flickered across his features, though his voice stayed even. That's all I need. Behind them, Isla clapped her hands. Finally, she giggled. Emmerich grinned shyly, hiding his smile behind his sleeve. Naomi laughed softly, her heart lighter than it had felt in months. For the first time since her return from the hospital, she allowed herself to breathe fully. Above them, hundreds of lanterns floated like golden promises, scattering across the night sky. each one a reminder that even in brokenness, there could be light. Naomi leaned into Corbin's side, Isla and Emmerich on either hand, and whispered the words she had, written on her lantern once more, this time not as a wish, but as the beginning of truth. May my heart trust again. And in that moment, healing began. 1 year later, the house at Rosecliff Hill no longer felt like a museum of memory and missteps. The walls had new photographs, not curated portraits, but candid ones, Isla laughing in the garden with cookie dough on her cheek, Emmerich building a cardboard fort in the study, Corbin asleep on the couch, arms around both children after a movie night. Naomi stood in the kitchen now, barefoot, stirring warm wax on the stove. The scent of sandalwood and rose filled the room, part of her newest blend for her candle line, Truth and Flame. What started as therapy had turned into something more, a steady business and a message she believed in. Each candle carried a name like Forgive Me, Start Again, Open Door. She never imagined this kind of peace would come, not after the betrayal, the doubts, the heartbreak. But peace hadn't arrived all at once. It had been slow, like spring after a long winter. Small choices, honest conversations, forgiving without forgetting. From upstairs came a thud and laughter. Emmerich and Isla. He had his own room now, not a guest room, not a temporary cot. Naomi decorated it herself, with soft greens and navy blues, shelves full of adventure books, and a nightlight shaped like the moon. He still called her Naomi, but the warmth in his voice had changed. It held trust. Corbin had changed too. He stepped back from the empire he'd spent years building and poured himself into something new, a local literacy fund. Every week, he volunteered at the elementary school, reading to kids who didn't have the luxury of bedtime stories. Naomi had watched him read The Velveteen Rabbit to a classroom once, his voice steady, children wide-eyed. She'd felt tears prick her eyes, not because he was perfect, but because he was trying. And trying mattered. Every night he still asked, "Do you need space?" Some nights, she said yes. Other nights, she pulled him into bed beside her, her hand resting on his chest, listening to his heartbeat until sleep came. Naomi no longer pretended that love alone fixed everything, but honesty, presence, and the willingness to grow. That was a foundation. The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting soft golden light across the garden. Naomi set 2 cups of cocoa on the nightstand and stepped into Isla's room. Books were scattered across the bed, and Isla sat in the middle of them, legs crossed, brushing her doll's hair. Emmerich was on the floor, building something with Legos, half spaceship, half castle. All right, Naomi smiled, easing down beside them. 1 story. Then sleep. 2 stories, Isla bargained. 1.5, Naomi countered. Emmerich grinned. I'll take the half. They settled in together, and Naomi began to read, softly, with the kind of voice that invited dreams. Isla snuggled under the quilt, Emmerich leaning on his elbow, eyes tracking every page. As she read, her voice slowed. The house quieted. The world felt full. When she reached the last sentence, she closed the book gently. Isla blinked slowly. Mommy. Yes, sweetheart. Is love always hard? Naomi paused. No, she said. But the strongest kind is the kind you fight for. The kind you tend to every day, like a garden. Isla nodded, already drifting. Like Daddy does. Emmerich looked up at her. And like you do. Naomi brushed his hair back, her chest tightening. Yeah, like I do. She turned off the lamp and watched their breathing slow, soft, and safe. Closing the door behind her, she walked past the study, where Corbin sat typing quietly, his glasses slipping down his nose. He glanced up and smiled. Naomi didn't say anything, just leaned in and kissed the top of his head. I love you, he whispered. She squeezed his hand. I know. The air outside had cooled. She stepped onto the porch, wrapped in a soft shawl. Stars peeked through the sky above Rosecliff Hill. Naomi stood there, breathing in the night, feeling the heartbeat of a home no longer haunted by secrets, but alive with new beginnings. A home filled with real love, flawed, tested, but fiercely true. If this story moved you, please subscribe, hit the like button, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Let's keep telling stories that heal.